video games. They're changing how we play, learn, and connect with one another. Now, the time has come to honor those video games that are the most widely recognized and remembered. Games that have enjoyed long popularity. Games that hold significance throughout the world, influencing other games, entertainment, and popular culture. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the induction ceremony for the World Video Game Hall of Fame.
Welcome to the third annual World Video Game Hall of Fame induction ceremony from the Strong Museum in Rochester, New York, home of the world's largest collection of dolls, toys, games, video games, and other play-related artifacts. I'm John Paul Dyson, director of the Strong's International Center for the History of Electronic Games. We're delighted to welcome members of the museum's Board of Trustees, members of the World Video Game Hall of Fame International Advisory Selection Committee, museum members, representatives of the media, and those watching live on Twitch. For those of you using social media throughout the induction, we're using the hashtag #VideoGameHall, and the museum's Twitter handle is @MuseumOfPlay. Today's induction is a lead-in to a weekend full of family fun that celebrates past inductees to the hall, including Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario Brothers, as well as the new inductees that we're introducing today. We invite all of you to join us for the activities on Saturday and Sunday, May 6th and 7th, here at the Strong. Everything we do at the Strong is founded on the understanding that play is an essential activity, critical to learning and human development. Electronic games especially have changed how people play, learn, and connect with each other, including across boundaries of culture and geography. Through the World Video Game Hall of Fame, the Strong recognizes games of all types, arcade, console, computer, handheld, and mobile, that have exerted influence and enjoyed popularity over a sustained period of time. They've exerted influence on the video game industry in general and popular culture in society. This year, 12 games meeting the basic criteria were considered by the International Selection Advisory Committee. Those games are Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy VII, Halo Combat Evolved, Microsoft Windows Solitaire, Mortal Kombat, Myst, Pokémon Red and Green, Portal, Resident Evil, Street Fighter II, Tomb Raider, and Wii Sports. In a moment, my colleagues, Jeremy Saucier and Shannon Simons, will help me announce the 2017 class of the World Video Game Hall of Fame. Following the announcement, Jeremy, Shannon, and I will be available for questions and interviews. Now, let's welcome our first inductee. Necessity is the mother of invention, as our first inductee demonstrates. In 1981, Nintendo's fledgling North American video game business faced disaster. Thousands of copies of the company's arcade game, Radar Scope, had arrived from Japan, and it was clear that the game would not sell. Nintendo needed a new game fast, so the company put an unknown junior employee, Shigeru Miyamoto, on the job. In a few months' time, he created a game that would launch his fame, earn the company a fortune, and give the video game industry some of its most beloved characters. Mr. Miyamoto created a story, a first for arcade video games, in which a monster ape kidnapped the girlfriend of a loyal construction worker. The plot unfolded in 4 scenes. The intrepid hero jumped barrels, climbed ladders, ran up girders, smashed fireballs, and overcame other obstacles to save his darling. Then the giant ape would grab his love, and forcing the hero to try again. Nintendo sold more than 100,000 copies of the arcade game in the United States alone and ported it to numerous home systems. Audience loved the game's bold graphics, simple but compelling story, and lively sounds. The hero especially stood out. Initially named Jumpman for his signature leaping move, Nintendo of America employees renamed him Mario after the owner of their warehouse. Still, the original arcade game was named not after the plucky plumber, but for his arch nemesis. This giant gorilla has appeared in dozens of games. Now it's time to welcome his title debut into the World Video Game Hall of Fame. The first game to enter the 2017 class is Donkey Kong. And now, for a special video from Don James, Executive Vice President at Nintendo of America.
Hi, I'm Don James of Nintendo of America. I'm standing next to a game near and dear to my heart, as Donkey Kong was the game that put Nintendo of America on the map. It's also near and dear to my heart because I was one of 2 employees that gave the main character, known as Jumpman in Japan, the name Mario. I'd like to thank the Strong on behalf of Nintendo for inducting Donkey Kong into the World Video Game Hall of Fame. Again, thank you very much.
Donkey Kong was a mainstay of arcades in the early 1980s. But by the end of that decade, the arcade was no longer the vibrant gaming space that it had once been. Released in 1991, our second inductee changed all that by transforming arcades, pizzerias, convenience stores, and living rooms into virtual arenas where players traded flurries of digital punches, kicks, and the occasional Hadouken! Previous arcade games often focused on battling against a computer opponent, competitions for high scores, and multiplayer cooperative play. But the appeal of this game was a head-to-head face-off against an equally skilled human opponent. And in the arcade, the only way to keep playing without paying was to win. Now, the best players learned complex signature moves and tactics that could rout a novice with dizzying speed and impressive skill. In the dimly lit arcades of the 1990s, crowds of onlookers huddled around these expert players to examine their precise joystick movements and their button mashing. Before easy access to online gaming, many of these expert fighters even traveled like conquering heroes from community to find and face local champions. These fierce arcade tournaments and competitions ultimately became a training ground for many of the hardcore gamers and esports athletes of today. Numerous variations and sequels, a devoted esports following, and a parade of imitators testify to the enduring influence of the game that popularized the fighting genre. And that's why our second inductee of the 2017 class of the World Video Game Hall of Fame is Street Fighter II.
Round 1, fight!
And now, for a special video from the team at Capcom.
皆さんこんにちは。カプコンストリートファイターシリーズエグゼクティブプロデューサーの小野義則です。今回は殿堂入りの報告いただき本当にありがとうございます。とても我々チーム一同嬉しく思っています。ストリートファイター今年で30周年を迎えることができました。これも皆さんの応援のおかげだと思っています。これからも引き続きよろしくお願いします。それでは皆さんありがとうございました。
Our first two inductees had a huge impact on the arcade scene, but who wants to be lugging giant arcade cabinets around all the time? This next game offered players a much more portable experience. It also has its roots in something you might not immediately associate with video games: bug collecting. As a child, game developer Satoshi Tajiri spent hours collecting insects in his hometown of Machija, Japan. When Nintendo released their Game Boy handheld in 1989, Mr. Tajiri had a vision of an insect crawling between two systems via the Game Link cable, which allowed players to connect their consoles together. In 1996, Nintendo released a pair of games subtitled Aka and Midori, which challenged players to collect 151 creatures, either by trapping them in-game or trading them with friends. Though the game could be completed without finding all of the creatures, many players considered this just as important as finishing the plotline, if not more so. Despite the fear that cute monsters wouldn't appeal to players outside of Japan, the game became a worldwide phenomenon and holds a Guinness World Record as the best-selling role-playing video game of all time. The franchise now contains dozens of games, with 721 individual creatures to collect, along with hundreds of animated episodes and films, and a whopping 21 billion cards produced for a competitive trading card game that is played, collected, and swapped by millions of devoted fans. Perhaps most importantly, the game fueled an interest in Japanese culture for a generation of children. In 2016, the popularity generated by a mobile spin-off proved that players around the world still feel like they've got to catch them all. And that's why our next inductee to the World Video Game Hall of Fame is Pokémon Red and Green. Well, now we've covered arcades and handhelds, so let's turn to home consoles. In 2001, Microsoft broke into the gaming industry with the Xbox, the most graphically powerful console of its time. The Xbox launched with about 20 games, but one of them stood out high above the rest. It sold alongside 50% of all consoles and became known as the platform's killer app, a program so valuable that its loss would render the hardware much less desirable. This game helped redefine the first-person shooter genre. Until its launch, the most successful shooters required a personal computer and the precision offered by a high-quality mouse. This inductee proved a console could produce an experience just as impressive. It also offered a rich, immersive universe with compelling characters and an intricate plot, which were almost unprecedented in the genre at the time. And despite launching before Xbox Live, the game's multiplayer was so popular that players willingly lugged their consoles back and forth to communal areas to link up their systems and play together. Since its launch, critics have compared this game to the Star Wars movie franchise and Virgil's epic, the Aeneid. Many games have tried to both duplicate and surpass its success, but none have given players the same lasting enjoyment, nor have they impacted our culture in quite the same way. Microsoft's personal assistant, Cortana, has over 100 million active users per month. But without the famous artificial intelligence of the same name found in this game, who knows where all those people would find their information? We have a long way to go before we reach the 26th century, but this game's future is already part of our present. So get ready to join Master Chief, fight the Covenant, and unlock the secrets of a mysterious ring-shaped world, because our final inductee into the 2017 World Video Game Hall of Fame is Halo Combat Evolved.
Punch it.
Sir. We're disengaged, going for minimum safe distance.
And now, I'd like to introduce a very special guest to say a few words about the impact of Halo. We're pleased to have with us today Frank O'Connor, Halo Franchise Development Director at 343 Industries.
Good morning. It's been a tremendous pleasure to be here this morning. I got a tour of both the museum and some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, and I've been working on the Halo game series since I was a wee lad. So I'm here to accept. This is an honor, and I'm here to accept it on behalf of Microsoft. Obviously, we own the franchise and we run the franchise, but Bungie Studios, who created the game in the first place. And looking around at the company that we're keeping this morning, it's a tremendous honor. These are games that inspired and energized me growing up, and these are the games that inspired me to get into the video game industry in the first place. The interesting thing about all of the inductees today is that they are still alive and kicking. The video game industry, as we understand it, is almost 50 years old now. We tend to talk about it as if it's a new technology fad, but it's a mode of play that people have grown up with for the better part of a half century. And it's here to stay. Things have changed, the technology changes, and I think that's one of the things that separates it from other types of play. I've been checking out the board games, jigsaw puzzles, action figures, and toys here. Video games don't replace any of those things. They complement them, and they give kids new ways to interact with worlds and wonders that they previously haven't had. It doesn't replace the imagination. It doesn't replace the amount of I think intellectual energy that kids get from reading a book or from imagining the content of a board game. But it does something else. It empowers them. It gives them places to explore, gives them characters to meet. And I think in some ways it's a better replacement for TV and movies than other modes of play. So it's a tremendous honor to be here. I just wanted to share a weird story about Halo in particular. This is a museum and this is a piece of Halo history. The game didn't start out as a first-person shooter at all. And it certainly, most of you probably know that it didn't start on Xbox. So the controls that you take for granted when you play modern console games didn't precede this. There were older games like GoldenEye that had sort of prototyped some of these controls. But Halo started as an RTS, or a real-time strategy game, where you were moving units of a little army around in a third-person mode. And one of the engineers from Bungie, a guy called Charlie Goff, was messing with the camera one day in the game, and it normally sort of helicoptered over the action and viewed it from the 10,000-foot level. And he just stuck the camera on one of the units' faces and thought this was a pretty fun way to play the game, this sort of sandbox that they'd created. Video games and accidental invention go hand in hand, but I think maybe more striking is how much that industry and that art form has evolved over the last couple of decades. If you're worried about your kids playing too many games, if you think it's a waste of time, it's a real career. It's a big industry and it's growing. And there's actually apparently a pretty good program at Rochester University. So it's not the end of the world if your kid wants to move into video games as a career. It's been a tremendous, it's half of my life at this point. And I'd argue it's the best half. Thanks for having us. And again, a tremendous honor to be here. Thank you.
So it's official. The inductees into the third class of the World Video Game Hall of Fame are Donkey Kong, Street Fighter II, Pokémon Red and Green, and Halo Combat Evolved. We'd like to thank Frank O'Connor from Halo and 343 Industries for being with us. Also, thank you to Don James from Nintendo and the team at Capcom for their videos. Jeremy Saucier, Shannon Simons, and I will be available for questions and interviews. You're also welcome to play and film versions of some of the inducted games throughout the World Video Game Hall of Fame display on the museum's second floor. Thank you all again for joining us this morning, and congratulations to the 2017 class of the World Video Game Hall of Fame.